Thank you very much, Greg. I'd like to do a new member introduction. Very pleased to ask Graham Donovan if he would please join me here on the stage. Graham is not new to Rotary by any means and has recently transferred to our club from the Morgantown North Rotary Club in West Virginia, and where he was an active member for 11 years and also served as president for 2 years. Dr. Donovan has also worked on economic development of low-income countries for more than 40 years. And during that time, he's worked in India, the Middle East, South and East Asia, 7 countries in Africa, and he's also been teaching international development at several universities. In his development career in university teaching, he focused on global poverty and hunger, women in development, food policy, biotechnology, environmental policy, and global climate change. We could run the United Nations. In Morgantown, he served on the board of Scots Run Settlement House, which is a community service organization, for 6 years, and served as its president for 3 years. In the past 10 years, he has climbed Mount Hood in Oregon, the Grand Teton Mountain in Wyoming, Mount Elbert in Colorado, which is the second highest peak in the lower 48 states, and several mountains in the New Zealand Alps. So, Graham, we're delighted to have you. Welcome to the Rotary Club of Lowell.
He gets a coffee cup because he has an already outstanding collection of pins. Over the weekend, I had an opportunity to sit down to Florida, and I was down around Tallahassee. And my biggest complaint was that they kept breaking into 60 Minutes to give an update on the tornadoes. So when the next day, when you see that 23 people lost their lives, the devastation, I did not see any of that. But eastern Alabama got hit hard. A mile and a half wide swaths cut out of the community. Dozens injured, 23 people. And billboard was carried 35 miles by that storm. So you can imagine the power. So I got a message from Mike Owsley, who's the district governor, forwarding a request from Samuel Adams, who is the district governor for 6880, which is eastern Alabama. And they're looking for donations. We will get the information on how to do that. But what we typically do at Rotary, right, is donations, a capital investment. But we also look at sweat equity of helping folks out. So there will be some way for people to use some of that people power that they've got, supplies. We'll have more information about that. But please keep all of those folks in your thoughts and prayers. All right, now the fun part. Jean Wesley Savio will introduce our today's speaker. Jean is the owner and producer of Face West Productions and the host of NPR's All Things Considered. I had been thinking of swapping radio shows, and then she got that job, and religiously every afternoon I find someplace to drive to. Jean serves on the board of directors and is a member of the Speakers Committee. Jean.
Oh, I can see everybody. That's right. That's awesome. April 21st, 2016, Business First. The headline read, Humana says it will continue to sponsor this well-known Louisville event. The article went on to say, the Humana Foundation has extended its sponsorship of the Humana Festival of New American Plays at Actors Theater, Louisville. The sponsorship, which began 37 years ago, has been extended to 2019. This article was to ease concerns about the future of the foundation's support in light of the planned acquisition in 2016 of the parent company, Humana, by Aetna for a reported $37 billion. It sent the arts community into a tailspin. The thought of its jewel of the theater, recognized internationally with awards and plays debuting there, becoming popular movies, the acquisition didn't happen. But Humana Foundation stayed, committed to the arts. The eyes of the theater world are this week focused on that very festival. But the Humana Foundation remains committed to not only the arts, but new initiatives collaborating with nonprofits around the world that focus on healthy behaviors and education. The guiding force behind that vision is the Foundation's Chief Executive Officer, Walter Woods. With more than 30 years of corporate, nonprofit, and social development experience, Walter came to Louisville from the Good Samaritan Foundation in South Dakota, where he served as president. A graduate of Howard University with an MBA from Northwestern's Kellogg's Graduate School of Management. And as you will hear, Walter is leading the Humana Foundation in bold new initiatives that promise to impact lives around the world. Please welcome Walter Woods.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. You know, the contact I had with the Rotary Club was in South Dakota. I was there for less than 3 weeks and they asked me to become a member. I was in Louisville for a year before you guys invited me here. So, a little standard there. Gotta step it up a little bit. Thank you, first of all, for this opportunity. It's a very special place here at the Muhammad Ali Center for me to be here and do this with you. I do not have a television, so I require, I do a lot of reading, listen to a lot of radio to get the information that I need to get to make decisions that I make. I made a conscious decision to get rid of television about 5 years ago because I felt that it was just too toxic for my mental health. So there are other ways that I get information that's more appealing to me. And so I say that because there are videos that I look at throughout the day sometimes to help me get through the day. And there's some videos that Martin Luther King has that are not very well known. And one of them speaks specifically about signing a contract with yourself for taking responsibility of who you are and where you go in your future. And that was one of the things that my parents taught me early on. One of the things that Jean did not mention was that I used to live in Louisville, and my dad was born in Louisville, Kentucky. So I have a connection. I'm actually a Boomerang resident, coming back to Louisville after 42 years. It's interesting how life sort of goes back, to where it started. I was here for 4 years. I went to Cameron Middle School for 3 years, and I went to Ballard High School for 1 year. So it's quite ironic that Humana would call me up, actually reach out to me through LinkedIn to ask me if I was interested in coming to Kentucky to run their foundation. I told them nothing about my history here because I did not want that to get in the way. I only wanted them to know after they made the offer to me that I actually have roots here and that I was very intentional about deciding to come here. So before I get into my presentation, I want to talk a little bit more about myself and about what the foundation is trying to do in this community, and then open it up for questions. So as a child, my father was in the Air Force. We traveled all over the world. My sister was born in Anchorage, Turkey. We quickly figured out how to move into communities and develop relationships because we knew that we were only going to be there for probably a year at a time. So I like to let people know that I led a yes life in the no world. We were constantly told that we weren't able to do things, and that happened to me when I was here in Louisville. My mother was a school teacher. She worked at JCPS, and she worked with special needs kids. And she took the hardest cases in terms of students that other teachers did not want to take. And she transformed their lives, and I saw her do this every day. She was very emphatic about making sure that we read lots of books. So I was in all kinds of summer programs, constantly reading, constantly exploring the world outside of Kentucky. And I think that's really what helped me get to where I am today. realizing that this is a big world and that people are different and that we really need to understand how do we celebrate those differences as opposed to criminalizing them and telling people that they don't belong, because the sense of belongingness is something that I've always had in my life. Recognizing that there were people who loved me, who wanted me to be in that space, and who wanted me to succeed. And I really think it's those expectations that we create for the people in our communities, help them feel that they can make a contribution that makes a difference. And I think that's how I ended up where I am today, because I started out on a business track thinking that I was going to go to Wall Street, become an investment banker. I interviewed with some companies on Wall Street, Salomon Brothers in particular. And I decided, I made a decision that I just didn't want to go that route. It wasn't something that gave me joy, and it really didn't help me understand how to make the communities that I knew needed help better. And so I really started to use one of those 35,000 decisions that we make every day as adults to intentionally change the direction of my life. So I did say that. We make 35,000 decisions a day as adults, and as young people, they make 3,000 decisions a day. So every decision we make changes the trajectory of our lives. And there are milestone decisions that change our lives in such a way that put us on a path that brings us closer to our passion. And I really think that that's how I got to where I am today. I was in Washington, D.C. before I actually came here. This was 4 years ago. And I was sitting in a position and I decided that I really was not where I needed to be. And so I quit that job. And I took some time off. Went to Mongolia. This is something I've also wanted to do. I love horses, and I love Genghis Khan, and so I decided I'm going to go do a horse trek through central Mongolia for 2 weeks. I hadn't been on a horse in 20 years. The first horse I rode was here in Kentucky. It was a dude ranch down near my house because I lived across the street from Ghost Town on the River. I don't know if people know about that amusement park that was down in Southwestern Parkway, but I used to live across the street from that. So the first horse I rode was there, and I was always fascinated with Genghis Khan and what he was able to create in his life, conquering the world, right? And so I decided I need to figure out where I want to go and how I want to get there, but I need to make a conscious, intentional decision about changing the trajectory of my life. So I've got to do something dramatic. So Mongolia. I had no idea really where it was. I hadn't been on a horse in 20 years, and so as with everything, you have to choose the right partner. So I called National Geographic and asked them if they had trips that I could take to go to Mongolia. So of course they did. And there were only 3 people on this trip. There were 2 women that joined me. One was from Chile, the other was from Argentina. And they had ridden horses all their lives. They had horse farms, blah, blah, blah. So I show up. We had a wrangler and his son with us. And we started this trek. It was 8 hours a day. We rode in the rain. We were on horseback for 8 hours a day, right? I didn't really think this through, I was just sort of like, I didn't tell them that I had done this before. So we started this trek, and it totally transformed my life. I finished it, I got through it, and I came back to the U.S. jobless. My father thought I was crazy. He was like, what are you doing? You didn't go to MBA school to do this. How are you gonna take care of yourself? I'm not doing it. You're an adult now, and you are no longer on my payroll. I told him this is what I needed to do to figure this out, and I came back and decided to be more intentional about running a foundation. And I remember telling one of my friends at the organization that I left that I will be the CEO of a foundation soon. And within probably 90 days of telling her that, it actually happened. But it happened in South Dakota. So this idea of leaning into your discomfort is one of the things that I've learned as I get older is it's very important to keep a growth mindset by leaning into your discomfort. You've got to make sure that you don't feel comfortable all the time, because that's how you grow. And I've done that most of my life. Some of those decisions that I told you about that we're making every day, some of them really changed the trajectory of my life because I put myself in situations that were not comfortable. I don't know why I did that, but I learned a lot. Taking calculus or physics, for instance, being in advanced placement classes at JCPS, being very intentional about doing that, but not really understanding why, but recognizing that I was growing more than I would have if I'd done anything else. So being in South Dakota, I did not realize how cold it was, because I didn't know too much about South Dakota. I mean, to me, it was a flyover state. You just kind of fly over it. Maybe you stop if you want to go to Mount Rushmore. But for some reason, this president of the Good Samaritan Society convinced me to come there and to serve as their development officer. Well, I have a very big passion for raising money. I'm a fundraiser by natural inclination. I love people, I love developing relationships, and I love asking for money. I don't know what that is, but I just love it. And so I went out there. Within 30 days of taking that VP position, the president resigned. And so they came to me and they said, can you do this? And I said, you know, that's one of the things I told you I wanted to do, is run a foundation. Absolutely. So they had me interview, put a vision together. After they told me that they wanted me to interview, the second thing I did was call my father. We were very close. To tell him what had happened. Could not believe it. He was speechless. Again, you know, leaning into discomfort, not exactly always knowing where you want to go or how you want to get there, but actually figuring out how to do that. Because another thing that I've discovered is that your pathway finds you. You do not find your pathway. So before I was 50, I always thought that by getting the right credentials, having the right experiences, that would lead me to finding that nirvana job that gave me the happiness that I was ultimately looking for. That's not true. I never in a million years thought that I would be in South Dakota. I never thought that I would be coming back to Louisville after some of the things that I experienced while I was here. Not necessarily very comfortable, but it happened. And so being in South Dakota, learning what I needed to do, learning what I needed to learn in order to do this job that I currently have now is what allowed me to be here. So Humana found me through LinkedIn. They sent me an email through LinkedIn asking me to interview for the job. I thought it was a joke because I thought, who would send an email to a potential candidate through LinkedIn as opposed to picking up the phone and asking them, are you interested? I had never heard of Humana. I sent back a note and I said, is this a joke? And if it's not, can you call me the way normal people talk to each other? And so they did. And 30 days later, I ended up here. It's been 42 years. I have seen a lot. I'm turning 56 this year. It doesn't feel like it, but it is. I'm not running away from that because I think it's important for us to embrace who we are and to show people that authenticity is what's important in leaders. To be authentic about who you are, to really love yourself. It's important to do that, to show other people that. And so I came back here not really knowing what to expect. The first question that David Jones Sr. asked and Bruce asked is, you're a fundraiser by background. Are you sure you can give away money? And I thought, wow, that's an odd question. Sure I can give away money. How hard is that? Wow, was that a stupid question? It is very hard to give away money. One of the things I didn't know before I took this position was that foundations exist for one reason. Before I took this position, I thought that the opposite of poverty was wealth. But the opposite of poverty is not wealth, it's injustice, right? And so foundations recognize that our communities have injustices that need to be corrected. And we are trying to develop and catalyze solutions that help everybody in the community do well. Because when everyone does well, everyone does well. Wow. And so doing that and recognizing that and coming here, I looked at what foundations do because I had never worked in one before and decided we were going to do some things differently. We are, and I'm going to get into the presentation now, looking at the history of the foundation. I don't know if a lot of people know about the Humana Foundation or history. I'll just turn it on. The Humana Foundation has been in the community since 1981, so a little bit over 30 years. It was founded by David Jones Sr., who founded Humana in 1961 with $1,000. It really put in the community to help create better health and well-being. That was really the initial mission of the foundation. We have 5 people on our board: David Jones Sr., David Jones Jr., Bruce Broussard, Heidi Margulis, and Chris Todoroff, who's our Chief General Counsel. So we only have 5 people on the board. We've had some changes at that level. As you know, some of you may know, Heidi has decided to move into what she calls preferment. If we use the R word, then we have to pay her because she does not want us to use that word. So we call it preferment. And so as you can see, each year we've had a signature program that we focus on. Right now we're focusing on social determinants of health because we recognize in Louisville we have issues when it comes to health care and with health in general. So we are trying to focus on complementing the work of the foundation. The foundation as a corporation focuses downstream on medical conditions, we want to focus upstream on what we call social determinants of health. So how can we prevent people from moving into those chronic states? And we want to do it in a way that gives people fair access to resources that are in this community. So we're putting an equity, a health equity lens on our work that allows us to do that. Equity for us is really about fair and justness, not sameness. And if you look at the graphic down in the lower left-hand corner, you'll see, or right-hand corner, you'll see what we mean exactly by that difference. All of this is on our website, and if anyone wants access to anything, do not hesitate to call me. I make it very clear that my phone is open to anyone. I talk to everyone that wants to talk to me, and I actually meet with everyone who wants to talk to me, because I think that's another thing as a CEO that I should be doing and keeping aware of what's happening in the community is by actually talking to people in the community and recognizing what some of their challenges are. The mission has changed. We are focusing on co-creating communities, and by this we really mean that foundations are typically sort of one way in the way that they speak to the residents, and we want to make sure the communities, we want to make sure that that stays a two-way track, that we're listening as well as co-developing, creating things together, focusing on not only just the culture of the community, but also leadership and the systems that exist within those communities, because some of those systems are locking people out, and we want to make sure that we can improve those systems and give all people access. Our strategic themes, as we are beginning to move forward, is fewer, bigger investments, and we're shifting from a funder to an investor model, as well as focusing on our bold go communities. So the investor model really is about helping nonprofits and the solutions that they develop, building those solutions, scaling them, and then making them sustainable so that we can walk away after a 3-year period and that solution still continues. So when we talk about moving from a funder to an investor mindset, this really is about taking this idea of giving money, catalyzing solutions, investing in things, away from the idea of focusing on activity. So I'm not interested in how many people are you bringing into your building. I'm interested in what happens to those people after they go through your building. How has their lives been transformed? What is it that you are doing that actually improves their lives and makes them healthier people today? That's a different mindset. We, in the past, have not been so rigorous when it came to that. We are being very rigorous now going forward, and we're creating milestones and metrics with each of our investments. We have 9 that we selected last year, and so we're working with them to develop metrics and milestones that help us understand what success looks like so that we can celebrate that one person at a time, and we know how many people we're doing that with. The focus areas that you see at the bottom of that slide are the ones that we decided to put a stake in the ground around and try to make an impact on. Food security, social connection, asset security, and post-secondary success. So those areas are where we really are doing a deep dive in our 8 targeted communities. So we're not only in Louisville, we're in 7 other communities across the Southeast. And we selected these communities because on the corporate side, they've been working there as well. And we think that we can deepen our impact by working in the same communities, but in a different way. So the foundation's work, again, is really complementing the work of the corporation, even though we have a separate board and there is a firewall that exists between us. We still want to make sure that we are complementing the work of the corporation so that the impact that we have in each of those communities is deeper. Specifically, the foundation programs that we've created are what we call the Strategic Community Investment Program. This starts with a $500,000 investment. Last year we had about 175 organizations that submitted proposals for the 9 that we selected. And this really is about developing a deeper relationship over a longer period of time. So when we talk about fewer, bigger, that's really what this is about, is deciding that we want to have an intentional relationship with each of those 9 investments. Some of them are in other communities. Louisville has 2, Family Scholar House and Metro United Way. But there was one community that we did not have an investment in, New Orleans, that we're going to be more focused on this year as we go through the second cycle of the Community Investment Program. We also created a Community Relations Program, which speaks to smaller population, those groups that cannot handle $500,000. So this program starts at $100,000, goes to $50,000 and $25,000. So So you can submit proposals for us for those amounts. We received last year about 100, also 175 proposals, and we selected 32. What we've done this year with this program is to focus specifically on Louisville and focusing on our 12,000 associates in Louisville to try to get them more engaged. So we've created an advisory panel of internal employees that go through a selection process of those 175. Then we have an associate vote. So we have each of the 12,000 employees vote on the selected nonprofits that we determine are the ones we want to move forward. Last year we had about 3,000 of 12,000 associates votes. That's about a 26% rate, which is not bad, but we can do better. We just opened up the second cycle voting yesterday. It will last for about a week, so hopefully we'll have more than 3,000 people voting. But we have given them a list of 36 that we've narrowed 150 proposals down to, and we'll probably come up with about 25 of those, and we'll be announcing after our board in April approves the recommendations that we make. So that's how this works. So the board approves our recommendations, and then we make the announcement on those. We also do disaster philanthropy, so we look at those communities that we are in and to determine which disasters we want to focus on, we want to support. We're partnering right now with a group out of DC called the Center for Disaster Philanthropy to put a disaster philanthropy plan together. We've never had one, so we're in the process of putting that together. It will be completed by April. So we'll have a set of definitions, we'll have a set of triggers and screens that we'll use to decide which disasters do we want to focus on and give money to and support, and which ones we do not. We have to be very clear about what's a tragedy versus what's a disaster. And we don't want to have to make those decisions while these events are actually happening. So that's one of the reasons why we're doing that. We also have a matching gifts program. We have volunteerism. One of the things that we're doing around volunteerism is implementing a new internal system that will allow all of our associates to customize their giving and volunteerism experience. We've never had that before, so that's pretty exciting. It's going to launch July 1st, and it's my goal to make sure that all 12,000 of our associates can engage in the way that they want to. That's not necessarily happening right now because our internal systems aren't working together to allow them to have a good experience. So this new system, which is called Benevity, is being used by Apple, Google, large organizations around the country. It's very successful, and we are about to implement that in our system as well. This is probably too small for people to see, but what it tries to say is, again, we are collaborating across the enterprise and working in tandem to make sure that our work complements theirs. This is basically a graphic that shows you downstream, upstream, and the solutions that we're currently investing in across our different markets. This is a slide that shows you all of the community relations grants that we gave out last year, and the variety of those investments that we made. And this speaks to the disaster philanthropy partners that we have. We work very closely with Feeding America, Red Cross, and United Way, Metro United Way. We also are doing research and learning. So through these investments, we're also making sure that we're learning so that it is changing our behavior in a way that improves the community. So we have a research agenda, and my newest staff person, Dr. Brandy Kelly Pryor, is running that effort. I think that's all I have. So I'll open it up for questions. If anyone has any questions, I'll take those now.
Thank you for your speech and your time today. What did Pioneer Simplicity, what does that mean? That just kind of stuck out. I didn't know what that strategy is.
Sure. We have Rethinking Routine, Pioneer Simplicity. One of the things that David Jones Sr. always tells me is if you can't put it on the back of a business card, it's too complicated. You don't really know what you're saying. And so this idea of Pioneer Simplicity is really figuring out ways to communicate a message in a way that does not require a lot of words, and that looks at the processes behind that message to make it as simple and as clear as possible. This is one of the things that we're always looking at is are the processes that we have in place the most efficient? And if they're not, how can we make them more efficient?
Could you talk a little bit about what that Mongolian horseback ride said to you, Foundation? And then tell us a little more about the 2 global projects that you invested in with the big $500,000 investments.
Mongolia was really about exploring what I had passion for, and I think to go back to what I said about my mother, and seeing how she built communities for a population of students that were disconnected from everyone else because of what people thought they did not have, was really what motivated me to come back and be more intentional about creating communities that were more inclusive, and that celebrated diversity and not criminalize it. So that's what Mongolia helped me realize, is that that's really where my passion is. And foundations, I think, are best suited to do that, to be those catalysts, to make sure that we're putting solutions forward that maybe the government can't put forward, that the private sector can't put forward, to, again, improve the communities that we're in. And in terms of the investments that we have here, Metro United Way is really focused on financial literacy and providing people with coaches that help them understand the value of savings and that help them build wealth. You know, asset wealth building is important, and to help them understand how to do that.
Can you speak a little bit about the, the decision on the areas in which you all decided to fund? Then also, if you can comment on the application window. So when is the best time to come to you? Is it always open, or are there certain times that we come with an application that
The process is always open. You can always come to me. I don't turn anyone away from a conversation, but we have specific dates that you can apply, which you have to remember. So the Community Relations Program is going to be going forward typically in January, so it'll be right after we get back from the holidays. And the Strategic Community Investment Program will probably be in July, after our first meeting.
Tony Kemper, the DePaul School, and the roller coaster at Ghost Town on the River is one of my favorite childhood memories, very underrated. When you look at you shared with us those 6 areas of focus, and as an educator, I see post-secondary. So is that exclusively programs that are for students that are of a particular age? How far into the continuum do you look in terms of programming or impacts that impact or lead to post-secondary success?
Sure. And to go back to the other question I didn't answer the question you asked about how we came up with those focus areas. So we are looking at focusing on a population that we call ALICE. It's the asset limited, income constrained, underemployed people. So these are the people, the working poor, that have 3 and 4 jobs and aren't able to go home and spend time with their kids. So post-secondary success to us means certificate programs that help put people on a career path, not a job path, so that they're making a living wage, but they also have promotional opportunities. So we recognize that population that I call ALICE really does not have the money to go to college. So what is it that we can do to help be a catalytic force in helping them get on a career path that gives them a living wage, that allows them to spend more time with their kids? And that's what that means. The other focus areas, food security, asset security, and social connection, just bubble to the top because most communities are struggling with those issues, and we think that solutions in those focus areas have the biggest potential to have the biggest impact. And that's really how we came up with those areas.
Sam Jones, thank you for your presentation here. Question. As someone who works with various nonprofits as a young professional, we do a lot of grant writing. And as someone who's on the receiving end of a lot of things that we write, you probably get a chance to look at some of the presentations we put together and judge whether or not we're fit to receive investments of various nature. So I guess I just want to ask a question. As far as organizations who do write and request funding, what's some advice you can possibly give to people like me who are seeking for funding and resources from organizations like Humana to invest in our initiatives? What are some things we can do in our grants or our submissions to make them stand out a little bit better, to make them more appealing, and possibly be recipients of funding? So how can we improve our grant writing proposals from someone who actually looks at a lot of them?
Sure. I don't personally look at those anymore. I did when I first got here, but now I have a team that does that. But it goes back to that value that we just talked about, pioneering simplicity. We have a character limit that we put there for a reason, because people have a tendency to give too much information that's not relevant to the question that we're asking. So remember, in answering the question, make sure that you're very intentional and precise about every word you use, because we read them. Words matter, and it's important for us to try to understand, since you're not in the room and you can't fill in those gaps that we're going to naturally have, that the words that you're using are actually answering the question, highlighting the results that you're creating as a result of your space. So what is it that you are doing that is transforming people's lives, not just checking off the number of people that come into your space, but how are you changing their lives so that they can begin to move in a more positive way without your help? Because we want to create sustainability, not a legacy funding opportunity. So that's what I would say. Any other questions?
That was great. Words to live by. Thank you. I'll have to think about that thing with the TV though. And I have to keep fighting that arm as I walk in the house. Let's give him another round of applause. We didn't get all those pointers the first time. It is available on video. And please pick up your parking tickets on the way out. And what was the other? Oh, Greg Sherman would like some company. So be safe. Have a good week. We are adjourned.